It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Well, it's officially summertime here in the Northern Hemisphere. Grab your iced tea, your lemonade, your iced coffee, whatever you're making, whatever your beverage of choice shall be, and sit back and relax. We've got a good episode. I'm recording this on Friday. That's right. Friday, June 21st. Why? Well, I'm doing my year ahead event on the 22nd, and it's sold out. I know a lot of you were trying to get in at the last minute, but we sold out. I will have the recording available in the Patreon shop. It's not going to be free for patrons. I don't make my year ahead predictions free for patrons until close to the midpoint of the year. Those predictions are for. So that'll be up in the Patreon shop. We do the follow-up in December because we're closer in. There's more context but I'm not going to lie. If you did go to the event, you could probably attest to it. I've got normally I have one page of written notes other than the astrology, just the astrological things happening. This time, until December of 2025, there's 2 slides a piece of just written, this is what's going down. There are some weeks where there's just so much going on. Not all of it's bad, guys. Not all of it's bad. There's a lot that happens in 2025. I will say it's a very, very spiritual year. And there's some very intriguing things going on. And I'll just trickling that information out as we go along. I did a couple of things on TikTok this last week. I put up the RNC convention chart. Yeah. So the RNC meets on their meeting opens at 8 a.m. on the 15th of July, which, speaking of year ahead, I've been warning for a year about July 14th, 15th because of the Mars-Uranus conjunction. Stabby, cut. I fully expect violence on that floor. And we could see leaders have health complaints. And there's also, if you go watch that video on TikTok, and it's the theme to 2001: A Space Odyssey. So, I did not choose that to go with that video. It was like the sound when I opened up TikTok to make a post. That was the chosen sound. I was like, this could not be more perfect. I was like, excellent. We're doing this. It was really funny. It was really, really funny because I was like, okay, this is a winner. And I just put written information up. So what about the Democrat convention? I'll get that up when we get closer to it. It's got some surprises in store as well. There's some very interesting things going on this summer politically. Very, very interesting. And I've told you for years now, many years, that Trump is not going to be president. Again, he's not going to lead anything. So I'm not concerned about that, but it could be that Biden is the candidate. I haven't been convinced of that either. And if you've been listening to me, I've been saying that for 2 years, not just since last year, for 2 years. But I'm not convinced either one is the candidate. Biden has the better transits. I can speak about what is and what's available. It looks like Kamala inherits the presidency. So how that plays out, I don't know. Okay. So yeah. So there's that. That's what I've been doing. I got my slides done really early this year. Normally I'm working right up to the deadline, but this time, and I think it's because I completely reworked my schedule. I know you wish there were more reading times, but the thing is I need to create stuff for TikTok and, of course, my patrons. I do the patron only podcasts. And in fact, this week I'll talk about the RNC and the DNC in the patron only podcast. Okay. I'm going to save the DNC stuff on TikTok for a little bit later because people forget. There's a lot of stuff coming up as we move through July. So there's that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about that and some other stuff on the patron only podcast. It's a very interesting summer. I would say it's a summer of discontent and a summer of exasperation. You know, when I look back at the 2024 year ahead slides, you know, the pressure is building through July. In August, people are just done. Like, they're done. Everybody is overdone. We're cooked. We're done. We're tired of dealing with this shit. We're tired of the lies. We're tired of the machinations of the power players. And that's everything from corporate to celebrity to leadership. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're tired. And we're tired of struggling. And so that's up on deck. It's forcing people to move collectively. Oh, there is something I want to bring up. Something interesting happened this week. And was a young lady, and I don't remember her TikTok user handle. Sorry, guys. I just don't. Too much goes on. But she was making some predictions about Trump. She is a professional astrologer, and I can tell she's studied. Okay. She's not ignorant of astrology. She hasn't just read a singular book. But she was making a public prediction, and you could tell she was really nervous and a little bit insecure about it. And let me tell you why. It is nerve-wracking to make public predictions, especially on the record, because if you're wrong, it can be used against you. Okay. And in election years, everybody wants every medium, every psychic, every astrologer to give political predictions. I will argue not everybody's able to do that well, because whether you're channeling energy, and you got to remember, I'm psychic and I channel. Okay. When I do astrology, I do astrology. You don't have to be knowingly psychic or knowingly a channel to do those things. But when we channel information, whether it's spirit, guides, higher self, the infinite intelligence of the universe, our brain is what is used to decode the blocks of energy or the waves of energy or the stream of consciousness, however you want to describe it. Our brain is what decodes that. Okay. And so that's why I always tell people, study lots of things, follow your interests. But it's re-election year. The average Joe Q public thinks they're a political analyst, and you're not. Just because you have opinions does not make you a political expert. Politics is a field of study. Political science is a field of study. Understanding how systems work. Anyway, this young lady, back to her, did the very brave thing of making a very fair astrological assessment. Would I have chosen other language than she did? Yes. Do I see it a little bit differently than she does? Yes. But a bunch of you followers went and tagged me or made a little snarky comment here or there about what she was saying. And I had to go in there and ask you guys to be kind to her. We straighten other women's crowns around here. There's no competition on this. Okay? She made a fair assessment. She used her own language. She is obviously not a political expert. She is seeing what she sees. And honestly, when you move past the exact words and you go for the overall meaning of what she's saying, I'm seeing very, very similar things. And astrology and astrologers should line up together. Okay. It should line up together. So, And she finally caught that I was telling people to be nice to her, and I did. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, hey, we straighten each other's crowns, period. Okay. There is no need to pit people against each other or tear people down. And while we're at it, while I'm giving you guys a lecture, you do not need to tag Matilda in my videos, and you do not need to tag me in hers. First of all, we do talk, not every second of every day. And we've pretty much got it to where we don't need to look at the world clock to know when the other person is awake or sleeping or working or doing their event, which, by the way, I'm recording this now while she's doing her event on the law of attraction. Both of us sold our events out, which is pretty exciting. Both of us operate using the principles under the law of attraction, meaning we worry about what we're doing. We don't bother ourselves with what other people are doing. We hold our own focus. We have our own clarity. We have our own predictions. And a lot of times she and I cross over and our predictions line up exactly. And sometimes we even use the same kind of language. Why is that? And that's why you guys connected us. Our audiences connected us. Okay. Why? Why do we use the same language? Because we studied similar subjects. Okay. She has a PhD in economics. I'm a U.S. Middle East policy specialist, and she's worked, in lots of different jobs that are very similar to jobs I have worked in. We have cross training, and then we have our own special interests. How she makes predictions is a different modality than how I make predictions. That's why we actually complement each other very, very well. We may even teach similar subject matter. And it's okay because people learn in different ways. Some people teach things in a way that benefits people of a certain kind. Another person's going to teach in a way that benefits people of another kind. Learners, language, there's learning styles. Everybody is different. Okay. Everybody's different. There's enough room to go around. And so you don't need to tag us. We know, we actually do. When we've got a juicy prediction we've made, we'll tell the other person, but we don't watch each other's videos. Like, as of today of the recording, she hasn't looked at 2025. She will after the weekend. Okay. I do mine this time of year to prove my accuracy as an astrologer. Okay. And then I do a follow-up in December because we've got a lot more context. And so I start filling in some blanks. That one probably won't be as long as Saturday. The Saturday is probably long because I've got two very packed slides. And thank you to my editor for having the time to do a little editing on those slides just to clean them up. So don't go questioning people. Like, I hate it when people give their predictions in my under section, like people who don't have an audience or whatever. I don't go around correcting people on their astrology or what have you. I make stuff on my channel. One, I don't have time. I just don't. I don't have time to look at everything. I did rework my schedule to give myself time. I'm actually doing some really cool stuff right now because I have time. Because I have time, I'm reworking a couple of the books I've had sitting around needing rewriting. I'm rewriting those and making them a lot more useful and easy to use, a lot less academic, still very valuable. But I think one of the problems with astrology, especially as the tradition has been in the last, say, 60 years, is this very academic focus on the writing and the descriptions, and it gets very over intellectualized. And what I'm trying to do is make it applicable. to life? Like, how do you use this knowledge? You can still study all the academic stuff, but if you know very little or just enough to be dangerous, how can I prevent you from scaring the crap out of yourself? And how you can use this in a very beneficial way with just a scintilla of knowledge. And so I've been working on that. I'm really excited about that. So that's fun. Oh, what a crazy time we're in. I have to say, by the time I got to the slides for June of 2025, I was a little stressed out. I was like, where are we going with this? Where are we going? And I actually had to stop and bake cookies. It's a huge thing. They were chocolate chip. It was funny because Matilda was like, you should make chocolate fudge. I'm like, if it gets any worse, we're moving to the chocolate fudge and I've got the stuff to do it. But I didn't have to. There's a lot of divine intervention in 2025. And it will be something else. That's all I got to say. So, wild. By the way, I still have to work on the magazine for July. We got a bunch of new patrons. Holy cow. Welcome, new patrons. I'll be doing patron shoutouts here in just a little bit. That's exciting. Super exciting. So, we've passed the full moon. We've kind of passed some of the bigger stuff. We've got Saturn stationing retrograde on the 30th of June. And I'll talk about that maybe. Well, let's talk about that right after some patron shoutouts. Why don't we do that? I think it's time to give some shoutouts. Now, remember, I got to do patron shoutouts in 2 parts. What the heck? Super exciting. That's why I did the Stanley Cup prediction. Jules, one of my patrons, asked about it. And I was like, she asked so nicely. When people ask me really nicely, I will do special requests. It's the demanding ones. The do this one now, do this one. Like on my live streams or in my comments section, do this. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm not Zoltan, the fortune teller, the little animatronic thing you see like in tourist traps. No. But if you ask me nicely and I happen to have the time, I will do that. And sometimes I like to do sports predictions because I don't follow sports. It's, ever since I divorced my second husband, not only is my TV rarely on, if ever, it's a special occasion when it's on. It ain't ever sports. Oh my God. If that is your personality, just God bless you all. It's so boring. I'm like, he does nothing with his life. He just lives through things vicariously. Yeah. I know. I'm normally a lot nicer about it and don't talk about it, but information has come my direction about the crap he says about me. And I'm like, oh, really? Two can play that game and one of us has a platform. Ha ha! Anyway, let's give some patron shout outs and then we'll talk about Saturn stationing retrograde on June 30th. Holy moly guacamole. We're like so many new patrons. Back when I first started Patreon and I was setting up reading in the Creator Hub, which by the way, if you have a Patreon, go look at the Patreon Creator Hub and read through those articles. There's so much good information. They said when you get to certain benchmarks, you tend to grow faster. And boy, that's been the case. I am a Patreon ambassador. Now I don't get any remuneration for that as far as I don't get paid to talk about it or what have you. If they hire me to do a workshop or something, that's different, which I have gotten to do that recently. I should post that up in the Patreon and you can hear me at the Fuel Your Fandom workshop. That was a really great experience. And I was interviewed on best practices and what have you. And that was super fun. I'll put that in the Patreon. But if you've been thinking about starting one, it is worth it. It does take time. It does take effort. I've learned a lot along the way because boy, I way wore myself out with it. That I don't know. I over deliver. And I don't mind about that, but I really overdid it. I made myself really tired with it. And so I've been working smarter, not harder. That's why we've got the Awake Space magazine. Super excited about that. The podcast came after I started the Patreon. We do so much. So it's super fun. So let's get to our newest patrons. All right. We've got Gary, Tina, Christina, Casty or Casty, Ja or Ya, if they're German, that would be Ya, Brendan, Sarah, Charmaine, Larrikin, the Daydreaming Mickey, that's cute, Christy, Pam, Syrup, Jocelyn, Monica, Cheryl, Anna, Maria, Jennifer, Elizabeth, Anna, Jennifer, Judith, Lily, Roni, Jay, Antonius, Janet, Lindsay, Tina, Jasmine, Elle, Kimberly, Ree, Roman, Bex, Kathleen, Celia, Yama, Christina, Cindy, Nicole, Rebecca, Heather, Gina, Latanya, Kel, Dina, Blair, Eleanor, S. Quintana, Kelly, Brittany, Sheila, Jonathan, Christina, Angela, Michelle, Bethany, Talitha, Thomas, Tracy, Completion, Aaron, Nicole, Taryn, Sandra, Christine, Tisha, Carrie Starr, Kat, Anne, Janessa, Van, Meredith, Melinda, Tracy, and Mrs. Coach. Okay, I'm going to leave it at Mrs. Coach, and we'll do the next round of patron shoutouts after we talk about Saturn Retrograde. Oh my God. And you guys are all joining at the best time because July is my birthday month, and we do cool stuff for my birthday month. Yay! Thank you so much for supporting the podcast and the magazine and all of my work out in the world. And I certainly hope what I do helps you. All right, let's talk about Saturn retrograde. I misspoke. It actually goes retrograde on the 29th at around 12 noon Pacific in the afternoon. And the 29th is a Saturday. So we are most likely to hear about Trump's immunity on the 28th because we have that debate happening on the 27th. I've looked at the astrology for that. It's kind of a shit show. I'm not going to lie. Trump actually has better transits for that day than Biden. So we'll see what happens that day. Biden will have a hard time speaking that day. Don't know me. Trump's not going to be president again. And like anybody ever cares about a debate. Like, do you not already know where these people stand? I think it would be better to have a duel at this point, okay? Or make them do a cage match, all right? Because for fuck's sake, having two geriatric people face up for what? It's not like their positions aren't unknown. At this point, it's ceremonial at best. But anyway, I digress. Saturn stations retrograde on the 29th, which means it looks like it's standing still. It'll be retrograde on the 30th. So it takes a minute for these things to look like they're moving backwards. And Saturn itself, is often the brakes on the energy. But Saturn in Pisces is not great breaks. They're not good breaks. You kind of have to downshift a little and nurse the brakes. And if you're older, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you learned how to drive a stick shift, you can do it in a manual gear too. If you've ever had the need for new brakes and you've gone down a hill and you can't slam your brakes, then you know what I'm talking about. That's Saturn in Pisces. Saturn retrograde in Pisces is a different story. Now, this is going to be all about rules, procedures, processes. And that's very interesting. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to rule that Trump had total immunity. I just don't. And looking at the RNC chart for the convention on the 15th of July, I think there's some surprises in store. So, and that could be with a bunch of leadership. There's some weird shit that happens on that day. And I'll talk about that in the patron only podcast. The debate happens the day before Saturn stations. So we are in the pre-retrograde and have been in the pre-retrograde phase of the Saturn retrograde. Now, some people are like, the pre-shadow. There's no such thing as a pre-shadow. There is a pre-retrograde phase. And that's where it appears, because remember, retrograde is an illusion. And in the pre-retrograde phase, it appears that the planet is slowing. And I want to point out that the Supreme Court made a really important decision just today, Friday. And today is the 21st, that people who've been accused of violent domestic abuse can be disarmed, meaning they can't have weapons, and that's a big deal. That was an unexpected ruling out of the Supreme Court, especially since it's around the Second Amendment. That's very fascinating to me. And it's so as Saturn is slowing down, it's when I think people are thinking about processes, rules. Some people are being reminded of their service, not Alito and not Thomas by any means. So those people are off the rails. I don't think Roberts is on their side entirely. He may be, but he's at least smart enough not to get caught at this point. I don't always agree with him. Don't think me. I don't think I'm defending him. I just think he's been a little smarter is all. I find it interesting that Amy Coney Barrett is going after Clarence Thomas on originalism issues because, maybe that's why she didn't know the Bill of Rights, because she's an originalist. Wouldn't want to read the rest of the thing, even though it's an elastic document designed to be amended. But, what do we know? God, these people. Anyway, so Saturn retrograde. It's going to be interesting over the summer to watch that. Why am I talking about politics and leaders with Saturn retrograde? Well, because Saturn rules authority figures. I think we're going to see an increase of the discussion of rules, laws, and procedures. I think it's going to be very nitpicky this summer as we look at public meetings. They're going to bring out the book on things. So Robert Rules of Orders, policies. So when you're even in things like the Olympics, you might see a very popular athlete, get in trouble, maybe not for drugs or something. It could be performance enhancing drugs, but it maybe not that obvious. It might be they didn't fill out a piece of paper, right? That kind of thing. So it's a cross your T's and dot your I's kind of energy. So that is going to be interesting with Saturn stationing retrograde. Now, one of the really good things about Saturn retrograde in Pisces is as it's retrograde, it kind of has a top note of Virgo there. And I will say this is going to give us some really good planning energy. If you need to get your resources put together, if you need to plan for things, especially like the weather, getting all of your supplies together, expecting a very, 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 very wet 2025. Okay. So even if you're gardening outside, you may not be able to get plants into the ground, even in a very moderate climate. You may not be able to get anything in very saturated ground until May, So you might want to prepare for some indoor gardening. You might want to look at how you're storing important things or valuable things. You might want to look at your gutters to your house. I would do a lot of maintenance over the summer, like if you've been putting it off and if you can afford it. I'm not saying spend all your money. I'm just saying if you've been putting it off, yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it. This might be the time to really go make sure, like, check your roof, check your basement, find out the emergency management planning for your county. Those types of things are good to do. Put away, dried goods, non-perishable food. Start building the pantry up. This is a good time to do it. You don't have to do it all in one shot. You can do it, a couple things a week, little extras here and there. I realized I'd kind of worked my pantry down. And I'm like, ooh, I gotta grab a little extra at Costco now because I had a bunch of stuff and we just kind of used it. So, it's time to refill the pantry. So Saturn retrograde isn't necessarily bad. On a personal level, you kind of want to look at where Saturn's transiting your natal chart. It's sitting at around 19 degrees of Pisces right now. So you want to find where 19 degrees of Pisces is in your natal chart. And wherever that is, that's where Saturn is traveling outside of your natal chart. Remember, the transits happen outside of the natal chart. We're not talking about your personal placements. And it could be emphasizing you have experience there. It could be having you get more organized or resourced. And I find it really funny because I've got Saturn transiting my 4th house right now. And it's very close to my North Node. It'll go retrograde before it touches on that. But it's technically opposite my Pluto in Virgo. Like by degree. Not exact opposition. And one of the things I've been really on myself about for a while now, probably the last, I'd say 8 weeks, has been I need to be more organized. I need to set up my schedule in a way that gives me a lot more range of motion. I can't just fill in my spots with busyness. I need to have, just a better schedule. Notice we're recording the podcast on Friday. I mean, I know you're not here, but I've told you, right? I've given myself more time where I'm not reading personal readings. I've set up a recorded reading schedule. Yeah, I'll tell you about that later. Those types of things. And yes, it's in the 4th house, but I'm also looking at things to do with my family and my domicile, and being organized is kind of part of that, and having time with them, and building our family business as well, which has always been a dream of mine. And then looking at my domicile, like how am I securing my domicile? Like where am I going to be? How am I going to be? Where am I going to live? Where am I going to spend my time? Where I'm going to hang my hat? So, that's, you want to look at the area of life that transit Saturn is pinging up. If it's the 1st house, this is like your personal sense of authority. Like you have to be a grown up. You can't blame everybody else in your life. You have to own your own self, your own shit, and be responsible for you. If it's the 2nd house, you're looking at your resources, your finances, how you spend your money, how you earn your money, how you organize your finances. You might have found that it's a lot of micro purchasing that gets you the most, that kind of thing. And maybe you're making more structures around that. Maybe you're looking at how to add more income in through a different system. If it's the third house, then you're looking at communications, how you speak, what you speak about, when you speak about things. Maybe giving yourself more credit or speaking with more authority. Those are all things up on deck with that. It could be that you need to take better care of your car or look at how you're doing your transportation. Fourth house, I already kind of talked about that. Home, family, domicile. And yes, depending on what's going on in your chart, you can look at the opposite house as well, because it's probably impacting that as well. Fifth house would look at like your schedule around children, hobbies, how you're spending your time. You might feel like you don't have enough time to have fun. I'm going to say schedule in your fun time. Okay. That's just as essential. It might not be a lot of time, especially if you have little kids. That can be hard. So, 20 minutes of peace and quiet, maybe bringing in some meditation or time to listen to music. Could be getting more organized around your own creativity. That could be there. Sixth house, this is getting more organized around like your health and your wellness, giving yourself actually a schedule to work on things, following through on your plans. Really, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and work hard every time, just take a look at what you already have written out and see how you can execute on that. It's really kind of showing up for yourself in your daily life, and then also advocating for your health needs if there's health stuff up. If it's in the seventh house, this is making sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's when you're looking at contracts and agreements. You're really going to feel where you're overgiving or you're overcommitting to things without a whole lot coming back in your direction. There'll be kind of instant consequences for that. You might see some out of balance relationships go away because of that. You may learn to get a lot more clear about what you need and express that and stop kind of giving your power over to other people or getting sucked up into their dramas, but really owning what you want to do. If it's moving through the eighth house, then you're looking at maybe your investments, how you share resources with people, kind of maybe setting up some better boundaries around that or better systems around investment. If you haven't been putting enough money away, maybe putting more money into savings or CDs or Roth IRAs, things like that. You might be working on some traditional practices or learning like maybe some folk magic or cultural practices that help you trust yourself more. It's really a time to learn how to trust your spidey senses. If this is moving through the ninth house, you might have had to change some travel plans or rework some ideas around your education. You might have thought you needed a certificate only to find out you didn't really need a new certificate or piece of paper or doctorate or whatever it is. And that, you actually do have the authority and maybe you need to plan like some marketing or messaging. Travel isn't going to be your best friend during this time period. You can, I'm not saying don't, but just be careful. Like if you're going on a road trip, you want to make sure that you get the oil changed, the tires rotated, all that fun stuff. If you're traveling by plane or boat, cruises are probably not a great idea for the interim, but if you're going to do it, then make sure you do all your planning ahead of time. Do make sure you're masking up on planes, etc., in public spaces and crowded spaces. If Saturn is moving through the 10th house, it's really about owning your own authority, showing up, taking responsibility for how you show up, not blaming other people, understanding that it's okay for people to have boundaries. You have boundaries. They're yours to enforce. Other people have their boundaries. It's for them to enforce. and understanding the difference between authority as dominance and control and just confidence. So like really learning how to show up with confidence is your best bet. If Saturn is moving through your 11th house, then it's important for you to look at your groups and associations and community groups. You might be asked to be in charge of something. You want to check the bylaws, the rules, the written procedures, make sure things aren't just verbal. You want to make sure that the rules are in writing, because there's nothing worse than having unwritten rules that you break and you find something out like, oh man, you did that. We can't believe you did that. And you're like, I didn't even know it was a thing. So you want to make sure you have things in writing. You might be amending bylaws. You might be dealing with that kind of stuff. And this could be anything from an HOA to a school board to a not-for-profit friends group, things like that. But it could also be with the people that you collaborate with. If you're a musician or what have you, maybe you guys need to get a manager. Maybe you guys need to look at having some kind of expert help, and you need somebody to help you read through all the agreements. And then if this is moving through the 12th house, this is about stabilizing your relationship with all that is. A lot of times you might view the universe as kind of a place of crime and punishment. And it's really a place of logical consequences. So I would just like really urge you to connect in with a little looser mentality. This retrograde is going to help you do that, like develop structures that help you receive more easily instead of trying to make it happen or negotiate it or like, hey, I'll be good. Please stop having crap happen to me, not recognizing how much of a role you do play in that as well. You do have a natural spiritual authority. This is a great time for you to start accessing it. So that's what's up for the Saturn retrograde. And like I said, Neptune retrograde happens pretty shortly after. I'm just trying to look. Yeah, our next podcast is going to be July 1st. That's crazy sauce. Can you believe June is almost over already? I mean, I've been so consumed getting ready for 2025. And honestly, now that I've lived through it, I'm so done with 2024. I'm like already at the end of 2025. I've lived it. I survived it. Yay me. I know, sarcasm, Laurie. But let me trying to find. Nope, I gotta pull it up. I am looking. And again, in our patron-only podcast, I'll go through what to expect this week. There's some interesting stuff that comes up this week. Interesting stuff for the Trumpster. So when we look at what to expect this week, I'll just give you, I think we're going to see with Saturn stationing retrograde, I think we could see a really big boat accident. We could see big windstorms globally. International agreements are under a lot of pressure too. There's going to be some alliances that fall apart. I think we're going to hear a lot about icebergs, Antarctica, melting glaciers, sea level, and sea ice is going to be in the news. We're going to hear a lot about fertilizer, chemicals, farm technology, and land and water rights. So water rights are like a big deal right now. And that was some of that farm stuff I was seeing. Surprise announcement regarding a political leader figure or elected official. A merger may not be allowed to go through because of anti-monopoly laws. We're going to just see extreme weather all over the place. I'm kind of looking for when. And see, we've got the moon in Pisces the 25th through the 27th. And this is what's really funny. This is how I know when Matilda is actually going to be dipping into the energy and looking at 2025 herself, because I knew the moon in Pisces was coming up and we were talking about it and she needed to get through her event. She was teaching a law of attraction class and she was like, don't talk to me about 2025, Laurie. I haven't looked at it. I'm like, I'm not. It's a shit show, but I'm not going to talk to you about it. Because we create we do our own things separately, just like I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, right? So anywho, I was like, wait, because we were looking at like how she was going to spend her time. And when she might look at the energy, because she has to sit with the energy. Anyway, she has to sit in the energy. And I knew the moon in Pisces was coming. And remember when we did our event together and I didn't look at the astrology? Yeah, and she got hit by all that energy. So I was like, whoa, do it Monday or Tuesday, but don't do it the 25th through the 27th. You know, and for her, it was like the 26th, 27th. I was like, just don't. It's going to be so much. You don't want to get sucked into that. That's all I've told her. And she was like, okay, so she's going to do it before that. But you may not hear about it yet. But she has to sit with it and write stuff out. And again, we don't share our predictions with each other in general. Once in a while, if we have something, like I'll see something on a date, I'm like, okay, I see a really big event on this date. Do you have any idea what might it be? She might be able to get more details out of it. She might see something but be not sure about timing, or look for like verify, like, are you seeing anything to do with this subject? I'll be like, oh, hell yeah, I'm seeing stuff with that subject. So, you know, we do that a little bit together, but not a whole lot. So just understand that. Because, and the reason why I'm talking about this, and I know she's going to talk about it on her podcast as well, it's about our own individual professional integrity. I have been a practicing astrologer for 3 decades. Okay. I have been a professional astrologer for 3 decades. I've been doing this for a very long time. I don't need other people to validate what I do. I validate myself on my own accuracy. And the same goes for Matilda. She is accurate in and of her own self. We don't need to validate one another. Okay. I've been at this a very long time. So there's that. And we support each other and cheer each other on. We're going to talk about it on the Sassy Seers podcast too, because we want to drive this home. Just saying. All right, let me take a look. Oh yeah, I had to look at the PDF because Canva ate my document. That was crazy. So let me look in here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so with the Saturn retrograde, like right ahead of time, I think we could see issues with pharmaceuticals, toxic chemicals, toxic waste, radiation, naval or maritime accidents, a skirmish or a battle. But it could also be due to big hurricanes, big rains, big storms, big floods, massive erosion events. Could see the use of missiles or drones. Yeah, I'll go through the rest. And Trump gets some really freaking bad news. That's kind of funny. And what days is this? 25th through the 27th. So maybe the news comes out then. I don't know. And so the moon's in Aries when Saturn and Pisces stations for the retrograde. And there could be some leaders overthrown in different countries, or political violence at the very least. Certainly looking at Iran, certainly looking at Taiwan, certainly looking at Philippines. There's very bad financial news for Trump. And it could be bad news for him in general on the 28th, which probably the immunity case, if they don't come out with it ahead of time. There's no way, though, they're going to grant him total immunity, because there's no way they want to give it to any other particular president. So, because it would give Biden immunity for anything at this point. So if they rule he's immune, Biden is de facto immune, and they're not going to grant him that. So I think, and you're like, but Laurie, he hasn't done anything wrong. But yeah, you grant immunity. Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he take out a political opponent at that point? He could take out Trump and say he was doing everybody a favor. So that kind of thing. Not that I think he's going to, but it's just a scenario. You have to think like that when you're making decisions like that. So that's what I think's up on deck with the Saturn in Pisces stationing retrograde. Again, it's not that big a deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but it's not. But the world's not ending because of it, is what I mean to say. We're almost to July. July is a shit show, my friends, but don't worry, we'll hold hands as we walk through it together. And on an individual level, you can have a great time. Okay. I'm seeing that in the year ahead readings I'm doing. Oh my God. It's crazy. So in the patron only, I'm going to go through the whole week, let you know what's up in the headlines. I'll talk a little bit more about the Republican National Convention and some of the stuff I'm seeing in the Democrat National Convention and all of that good stuff. And I'll go into a little more detail of what I think is going to happen this week. So, all right. Part 2 of patron shoutouts. We've got Laura, Yari, Starlight, Katie, Claudia, Elena, Jen, Lori, Moira, Brianna, Maria, Lena, Beth, Kara, Amy, Jamie, Meredith, Laura, Krista, Steph, Lee, Emma, Albano, Jess, Stephanie, Cynthia, Sarah, Lois, Veronica, Sarah, Julie, Joanna, Kelly, Kim, Susie, Patrice, Holly, Debbie, Joseph, Sharon, Eric, Robin, Jackie, Ashley, Jessica, Julie, Kelly, Mary, Nancy, Christy, Lori, spelled the same way as me, Mickey, Sarah, Katie, Danielle, Layla, Jeremy, Gail, Patricia, Dee Dee Capone, Kevin, Katrina, Lenora, a furry woodland creature, Shane, psychic medium, Deanna, Haley, Kristen, Julie, Jonathan, and Sarah. Thank you all so much for being patrons. Wow, I am really honored, and I'm not going to lie, this is really super exciting. I know you see me as somebody having, a good sized audience, and the podcast is becoming successful. We're number 13 on the FeedSpot top 60 list, which that's super exciting for astrology podcasts. And I'm kind of excited because most of the ones above us actually have teams. And I'm just the little engine that could. So I really want to thank you. I don't know if you guys have seen my YouTube channel, but I really want to encourage you guys to go like and follow that. And a big shout out to my good friend, Susie Evolutionary, for her amazing rebranding of my channel. And she's helping me get organized there. And she's great. She's also an astrologer and a tarot reader. You can check her out. She's a very sweet, trauma-informed, lovely lady. Giving her a shout out for her amazing work. Doing things, one, I'm not great at, but two, don't have time. So I am getting help. I've got an editor. Like I said, she's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm also looking at getting the assistant lined up soon. I still have a little bit to do to get ready for that, but I'm much closer than I have been, which is really cool. So we're growing and you're growing with us. And, like I said, without you, there's no podcast. So thank you so, so much. All right, let's go to the next segment. Oh my gosh, you guys, we keep growing. So this final part of the episode, I'm recording on Sunday morning because I didn't get it all done on Friday. And I did the 2025 year ahead on Saturday. And that was 2 hours just of 2025 plus an hour of Q&A. And the only people who get the Q&A recording are the people who registered for the event. If you registered and you couldn't attend, don't worry, you'll get your recording. It'll come out this week. For those of you who are like, wait, what 2025 year ahead? I missed it. Well, I do another one in December, and I'll have this recording up in the Patreon shop for purchase. Okay, so there's that. But if you are a patron, you can get the 2024 year ahead and stream that in there because everybody at the $5 level and up gets that as a perk. I just wanted to give a couple more shout outs because in the last 2 days, we've gotten a few new members. So I thought I'd give a shout out to Mother of Fangora, Jack, John, Erica, Margaret, Jennifer, Rain, Gary, Tina. So we got a couple more people. So there we go. I thought we'd end this podcast by answering a question from Christy, who's the great question asker. So I do a patron only Q&A, and I've been saving some Christy questions, both for this podcast and for the patron only Q&A, which I'm going to start making transcripts of. Thank you to you know who you are who asked. I won't be doing them for every podcast. I don't have the resources or the time to correct the transcriptions because the AI doesn't always translate what I say correctly, especially when I'm using astrological terminology. But I thought for the Q&A, that would be a great one to have transcripts for. Last Q&A for patrons only. There's some really deep questions, beautiful. And I answer more than just astrology questions. I answer questions about energy work, energy centers, crystals, intuition, understanding how to use your gifts, things like that. So, but this question from the great question asker Christy is, I recently listened to your Orange Man update from May 25th. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I did an updated pinned post. So every year I do a refresh on a big prediction. Obviously, Orange Man is what I call him. That I also talked about Biden and Alito and a bunch of other stuff in there. So if you're a patron, don't forget to watch the pin post. But then she says, in that you touched on a tidbit I found really enlightening. You mentioned after the age of 45, a progressed chart reading is as helpful as a natal chart reading. So you said progressive instead of progressed. And I'm going to just correct that very gently. And the reason why it's a progressed chart is because we progress the chart. The sun moves a degree for every year we were born, right? So it's a day per degree in this type of divinatory process. So you said you're a couple years younger than me. You're 52 and you have a couple of questions about it. So what's the difference between a progressed chart and the natal chart? The natal chart is, you never lose your natal chart, okay? But what happens in like a natal reading, if you're like, especially over 45, you might, if you've done the work, if you've done a lot of self-actualization, self-reflection, if you've worked on yourself, maybe you've gone to therapy, then when I'm describing you in the natal chart, you might be like, I was like that. Okay. That's a lot of how I was as a young person. The progressed chart will show how you are in your maturity. Now, we can see you in your maturity in the natal chart as well, but the progressed chart is more obvious about it because the natal chart holds all of your potential, good, bad, indifferent, ugly, and all of us can be good, all of us can be bad. It shows our potential challenges, how we can overcome them, what our healing path is, all of that fun stuff. So the progressed chart will show where you're at now. Okay, so that's the big thing to remember. But if you haven't done the work, if you haven't self-actualized, if you we don't really self-actualize all the way. We're not done until we're done, meaning we keep going the rest of our lives until we're not living. But when it comes to looking at transits, I find often I need to pull a progress chart for the clients that come to me because the people who come to me tend to be a little more self-aware. The people who are less self-aware don't tend to come to me. And anyway, and I'm not saying that it's because I'm awesome. I'm just saying they're probably not interested in what I do. So anyway, that's why I look at a progress chart. So the difference is the natal chart is a fixed point in time, and the progress chart kind of changes year to year. So there's that. What makes 45 the year for the transition? It's a couple years after the Uranus opposition, and the Uranus opposition is that midlife point in time where some people call it the midlife crisis transit. I've talked about it on the podcast over the years. It's one of my favorite transits. It's not always very comfortable, but it is where you look at your life and you're like, all right, I'm half dead. What do I want to get out of it? Some people go have affairs, buy a speedboat, buy a fancy car. A lot of people get divorced at this time just because they've outgrown their relationships, or they've grown into a different version of themselves, So it doesn't always happen. Don't worry if you're 42 and your marriage is fine. Don't worry about it. That may not be you. But around 45, you've kind of settled in to that energy. And the reason why I say 45 was just personal experience. I noticed around the age of 44, 45, that my own personal predictive techniques that I developed for myself were kind of off. And they'd be off by a couple of days or so. And I'd be like, wow, did I lose my mojo? I used to be so accurate. What's going on? And I decided on a whim to just check my progress chart. And the transits were much more accurately interpreted from my progressed. And honestly, I had done a lot of work. I had gone from having extremely severe CPTSD with other trauma-based disorders, to 0 clinical markers, which is like nothing wrong with you. And I had spent years and years and years working on myself to get there. So it made sense. I hadn't thought about it until, again, my own predictive techniques weren't working. And I've played around with it with different aged clients over the years. And I just find, again, around the age of 45 is when it becomes the most relevant. Even if you're doing the work on yourself in your 30s, even if you're doing the work in the 20s, the transits aren't going to be accurate when you look at the progress chart as compared to the natal chart. So let's see. Why, as we age, does our natal chart become less informational? Ooh, that's a really good question. And then you added if it does. I don't think it becomes less informational. Again, as I talked about this just a few minutes ago, we change, and what we want, like at 12, we might like the same kinds of themes, right? So I was always interested in people. Like at 12, I started studying graphology, right? Which is the study of handwriting. And you can tell a lot about a person from their handwriting. I was really into that. And I was fascinated by occult subjects. I read Manly P. Hall, and all those guys, Crowley, all those guys as a kid. So obviously I still have an interest in the occult subjects, right? But beyond that, on your day-to-day, things change. So who you are at 5, you don't have kids, you don't have responsibilities. That's reflected in the house placements. And so when I'm looking at somebody's chart who's over 45, I'm not looking at your interior life as much as I'm looking at what's going on in your life, how your life has changed through the houses. So it's a very house-based look at things. And so that's my process. So I think a lot of times when people are making political predictions and they're not used to doing predictive astrology, but during election years, everybody who knows like 2 things about astrology suddenly starts making predictions. With Trump, all they were seeing was that Jupiter in Taurus action happening at this, first part of the year. They weren't noticing anything else. And then, of course, Jupiter's going to be in Gemini. It's going to be on his sun. That must be good. Not necessarily. Jupiter isn't always good. So there were a lot of rookie mistakes I saw in people's analysis online over the last couple of years. And predictive techniques, they take time and they take study to learn. You can't just go on the internet, read a couple of message boards or blog posts and have everything. You need to do it. So, or even read books. I mean, like, there's good information in books. If you want to learn about predictive astrology, Bernadette Brady's book is really good, but not everything is in there. I don't know a single astrologer who shares their personal techniques with the world. We'll give things you can research, and we might explain it a little differently, or how we feel it needs to be more clear. But that's kind of our bread and butter. So your teachers don't even really teach you exactly. They might lay hints and drop hints once you're an advanced student. So there's that. I know it sounds so mean, doesn't it? But it's not. It's the way the world works. So there was that. I see a couple good questions. I'm just going through all the questions that are on the Googly form. If you're a patron, you can submit your questions too. Christy gave me a good library of questions, though. Oh my God, so many. These are like all Christy questions. This is great. Come on, patrons. Christy does ask amazing ones. Some of these I'm going to save for the patron only Q&A. I may have to just do a Christy episode of that. All right, Steve. Oh, I like this one. Steve of Finland. What's the best way to manage and protect your energy when you do a TikTok live? The first and only time so far for me going live was a few months ago, in which I felt drained and overwhelmed for days afterwards. Right, Steve? It can be like that. I'm often very tired at the end of my lives. So you guys have probably noticed my really pretty necklaces that I wear and my funkified rings, right? I've got a lapis lazuli ring that I wear a lot. I've got some amber rings that I wear. That's that big kind of orangey red ring that I've got. It's a big chunk of amber. I got that in the Middle East. So I wear a lot of silver jewelry. So silver can really help. It is draining to do live streams. I don't think people realize how tiring it can be, especially if you're really trying to interact with people, because it's actually not a two-way experience. It really is a one-way experience, because even though you have people, writing commentary, what you're not getting is feedback, right? So if you like to bounce ideas off of other people, if you like that mutual exchange, then it can be draining. And so this is the other way I do it. Remember, our imagination is our greatest tool. I pretend like you're talking to me. So that helps. I try to just really feel you in the room with me and that you're talking with me, instead of feeling like, I'm not getting anything back. But you could use silver as a help, like a chain, or, get yourself some onyx, turquoise, some kind of thing that helps. You can visualize a bubble around you, and you can also, you just have to kind of do it a little bit too to get a comfort zone going. So, but you should do it. Have fun with that. That was a really good question. So that's just kind of an example, guys, of what I do in patron only Q&A. I like to dabble it in here to the regular podcast once in a while. Got great patrons who ask great questions. There's no stupid questions, guys. Okay. Absolutely not. You can ask beginner questions. You can ask anything. Okay. Now, some of it I might not answer, right away. So sometimes I bank certain questions because I know that thing is coming up in a couple of months. I'll answer it then. So don't think I'm not answering your questions. I'll go through them. I'll get to them eventually. So there's a little method to my madness. Not a whole lot, but there's some. And you can find all the patron only Q&As in the category I forgot the word for a second. What am I? It must be late. Anyway, you can find that in the categories in Patreon. And that'll help you find what you're looking for. And I will be doing transcripts of those. I think that's a really good idea, especially for those who prefer to read over listen. Although I will tell you, I did a poll of members about a year ago, and more people wanted more audio. And so that's why we did it that way. So that's what we've got. We've got some interesting times this week, and I'll be talking about that in part 2 of this podcast that goes up for patrons. I'll go through the week. I already gave you a little bit in that Saturn Retrograde section, so if you kind of tuned out or you were busy or you only half listened, go back and listen to that section. And I'll talk to you next week when I prep you for July. Like, what the hell? It's crazy. All right, guys. Thank you so much for all your support, for being listeners, and you can join the Patreon for free by clicking the link in the show notes.